Welcome back to the Freedom Church podcast. And today's next level conversation is a really special one. Going to be talking with Meg Cook and Chris Kopok, two of the founding team of a brand new charity called One by One. And the vision of this is to see generosity changing lives all over the world. And so I got to jump on a video call. Meg's based in Cape Town, South Africa at the moment, and just have a conversation, a little bit more of the vision, the heart, and the journey of how One by One came into being. So we're going to jump straight in with Meg sharing a little bit more of the vision of One by One for anybody listening that doesn't yet know what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. So One by One is an organization that is birthed out of Freedom Church, really with the vision to see lives impacted all around the world through generosity. So the idea is that a single gift into One by One is split into 4 different funds. And each of those funds have an amazing, trusted nonprofit organization attached to them. And so each fund covers a different area or cause, and they are our mission fund, future, liberty, and emergency. So yeah, we're really excited about it. And our hope is that we can really support some amazing organizations out there doing incredible work on the ground, where we wouldn't otherwise be able to reach them.
Come on, that's amazing. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about this in regards to the journey we've been on, but the vision of One by One, I think, if I'm right, is to fundraise on behalf of partners in some of these areas and to help facilitate people on the ground, working some of these things. But you mentioned those funds, Meg. Tell us a little bit more about them and what we're hoping to achieve. And maybe let's start with the Liberty Fund. What's the vision behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the vision of the Liberty Fund is to assist organizations who are working to help people who are stuck in cycles of violence or abuse. And the hope with that is that we take a very holistic approach to that. And so we are hoping to fundraise for organizations that are helping victims and survivors of abuse, but also those who are stuck in a cycle of the criminal justice system in their various countries, and everything in between. So yeah, we're really excited about the Liberty Fund. Do you want me to go on and explain the others?
Yeah, definitely. So Liberty Fund, obviously helping people in those kind of situations. Then obviously let's hear from Chris on the Mission Fund.
So the heart of the Mission Fund is to help advance the reach of the gospel into environments that are hostile to the gospel, perhaps close to the gospel, but also or including using technology to advance the mission of the gospel. So we're really passionate about seeing the message of Christ and of the kingdom carried to the ends of the earth. And the Mission Fund is focused on helping facilitate that, especially in environments that are hard to reach into or where technology can be useful.
So the other 2 funds are Future and Emergency. And the Future Fund is all about fundraising for organizations that are working to provide education or employment where otherwise it wouldn't be available. And I think this one's really close to our hearts, Freedom Church, because over the years we've done a lot in regards to building an ability for education to be provided to young men in Uganda. And the Emergency Fund then, I'd say, is also close to our heart as a church, because over the years, and Chris will touch on this in a little bit, we've responded to a number of emergencies as a church. And the heart of the Emergency Fund really is to pool resources until such time an emergency happens, so that at that point we can partner with a trusted organization that is doing work quickly and effectively.
Man, yeah, that's so exciting just to think about these 4 different areas that through one organization we're going to get the opportunity to partner with, impact, multiply, what God's given us and seeing lives change. And just before we go into that history, because you touched a little bit on it there, Meg, there's also one other part, I guess, that's unique to it. And it's the drive to encourage people to give 1%, isn't it? And, it's funny when we think about 1%, if you go to a shop and you think, I'll give you 1% discount, we don't necessarily get super excited about that. But I think, share with us a little bit about this, almost the power of those multiplied 1%. So what's the heart behind that and the invitation for people?
Yeah, so the idea behind the 1% was really to help people be generous. on a regular basis, and to make it a really practical next step. I think we noticed that in our world in general, people are generous, but when they're prompted to do so, and when there is a need presented to them. And what we really wanted to do was build a culture inside and outside of our church where giving to others, giving to organizations was a practice and not something that relied on inconsistency or emotion. So, and whilst compassion is a huge part of what we do, we just wanted to make sure that it was regular so that we could really amplify the impact of the organizations that we're supporting, because we know that any organization, it's so helpful to have regular giving. And so those are a couple of reasons why we wanted to introduce the 1% idea.
Chris, you've been significantly involved in the journey of generosity and making practical impact and changing people's lives through our church. Just tell us a little bit of how we've arrived at this vision of 1 by 1.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So there were really three things that I think brought us to the idea for 1 by 1. The first was the global footprint of our church. You know, the last 6 to 8 years, our church has really become a far more global church. We were in a couple of places, now we're in all kinds of places. And we thought, wouldn't it be amazing to make a practical difference to lives and communities in all those places, and indeed in the places we're not actually in at the moment. So this vision to make a global impact. The second thing was we run a number of programs that we came up with or inherited ourselves as a church, and that's occupied us in a very deep way in some specific places. So I'm thinking of Freedom Heroes in Kampala. I had quite a number of Sunday afternoons involved in delivery of Freedom Heroes in Kampala, our ministry to kids living on the street, which was absolutely fantastic, but hugely consuming. Perhaps more consuming than running church itself in Kampala. Heroes became so big, and every now and then I'd have a coffee with somebody called Jill from an organization called Abana Ministries, who were a ministry for kids living on the streets. And I would walk away from that conversation thinking, why are we doing this when Jill and her team are doing this full time in such an excellent way? So the first thing was this sense of wanting to be global. The second thing was this thought that actually there are already great organizations doing all the things that we might want to do. Why don't we just get behind those organizations and help them achieve even more? And then the third thing that happened is in my personal life, every now and then I was making small investments into something called thematic investment funds. And thematic investment funds are a fund that you put some money into, and the fund manager splits your investment over a whole host of different businesses, splits your money into different stocks or shares in a whole range of different businesses that are brought together around a common theme within the investment fund. Perhaps that theme would be, ethical investment. Perhaps it would be new technologies. Perhaps it would be, social media and sort of the internet. And I thought, it's incredible, isn't it, how we're using thematic investment funds. Wouldn't it be awesome to have thematic giving funds where you bring together a whole bunch of different organizations that all do great work around the same issue or the same theme? And that's really how 1 by 1 was born. The themes for us were born out of what we felt a particular burden. As DLT, we, on a number of occasions, we discussed it. We went away to Scotland, we were driving around the Isle of Skye, really thrashing out, what are we most passionate about as a church? What are we most passionate about as leaders? And it was from that the 4 different funds were born. That's how it all kind of came together.
What are some of the things you're expecting to almost see greater results through taking that approach over continuing to do direct frontline? And I'm not saying that, I don't think we're saying that we will never do direct line front things ever again as a church, but that's a shift in the approach. What are you expecting to see as the fruit and the positive of that shift, Chris?
Well, I'm interested to hear Meg's view on this as well, but for me, two words jump out. The first is an efficiency. So hear this in the right way. It's like, why would we want to replicate what other people are doing really, really well? God's called people to that space, and his people to that space to provide services or to provide advocacy or to help people or communities that are in a particular set of circumstances, why would we want to try and replicate what they're doing when actually what really they need is additional people standing behind them, raising money for them, celebrating and sharing their stories of success. So if we stop trying to do those things and focus on what God's called us to do, which is to build church and to raise resources, there's an efficiency there, and I think that's a good thing in the kingdom of God. The second thing for me is the word smaller. We want to find organizations that might be smaller or lower profile. And we're not always going to be able to do this because, you know, sometimes we're going to put money behind medium-sized organizations, perhaps even occasionally large organizations, but we especially want to get behind small organizations that our supporters have not heard of themselves. We want our partners to be organizations that might fly under the radar or sit off to the side, operating, doing great work, you know, with great stories of impact. We want to get behind those kinds of organizations. You know, and I just love this idea that you have one fund supporting in time 5, 10, 15 smaller organizations distributed around the world, taking different approaches to addressing the theme of the fund. And that I, as somebody that supports One by One, I put some money into One by One, and my money gets to make a difference in all of those areas, in all of those ways. I just think that's fantastic. So, you know, those are two things that stand out for me.
Yeah, I love that, Chris. And I think I wholeheartedly agree. For me, it's about expertise. You know, there's so much expertise out there, and we get to partner with it. And I think that's so exciting. And on a personal level for me, I think over the years, I've often found myself going, I want to do something. I really just don't know what to do. There's so much you could do. There's so many matters that are close to your heart, so much that makes you feel troubled. And I think the more you're exposed to the globe, the more you're exposed to people in different areas of the world, you become overwhelmed, I think. And for me, One by One provides an answer to that, to say, you don't have to pick just one. You can get behind all of them. And I think that's a really powerful concept.
I think it's really important for us as a church that we do what we're good at. And, you know, we can be good at raising the profile of, celebrating, sharing information about all these organizations through One by One. Somebody came up to me at the end of the One by One launch event at Freedom Church and said, I love the strategic nature of this. I love the fact that we're not going to be replicating what's happening elsewhere, and we're not going to try and become experts in these areas, but instead we're actually just going to signpost people to these organizations, get behind these organizations. I love the strategic nature of it. And for me, they caught the heart of what we're trying to do in One by One. This is Freedom Church, born out of Freedom Church, but embodied in a new organization that we hope will grow to maybe become even bigger than our church in terms of its income, because we really have that kind of a vision for wanting to see significant funds unlocked and sown into all these areas.
Just to add one more thing to that, I think the final thing for me would be, we are a really passionate church, and so we can do a really good job of shouting about these organizations. And I think that's something I love so much about our church, is that you say, look at this amazing thing that's happening, and people start shouting about it. And the benefit of that for people and the organization is just huge. And so I think that's just a final thing I would throw in. Really excited to see that as well as we add our partners over the years.
There are a number of organizations we've already taken through the process of applying for funding. We have a funding committee that scrutinizes applications and considers applications. We've already made some decisions. But we think there's already lots to digest around One by One and the funds. But what I can share with you, one organization we have said we're going to be supporting is Abana Ministries. I mentioned them earlier. It's so important to us as a church that we honor our past commitments. And Heroes, so the young men that came off the streets through Heroes were resettled into their families and are currently getting an education thanks to Freedom Heroes, something we've been doing as a church for about 8 years. It's really important to us that we continue to support those young men right the way through their education. So we finish sort of that work well. So Abana Ministries, we've been partnering with for a number of years, and they've taken on various elements of what we were doing within Heroes, including caring for, managing the young men that are in school at the moment. So we're going to be partnering with Abana to provide finance for the education of those 17 young men who are currently in last year's of primary school, in secondary school, in college, or in fact, we've had one young man that's gone to university this year. We've seen him right the way through his education. So that's really exciting for us, and we will be sharing more. There's some really exciting organizations. And I just want you to kind of grasp this idea that we're deliberately building these funds slowly because we want to be sure that the organizations that we put into each fund are organizations that we can journey with over the years, but just get the idea that in the future, for each of those 4 funds, there may be 6, 8, 10, 12 different organizations that we're standing with in different parts of the world, doing slightly different work to address the theme of the fund. I think that's so exciting. And for us to do that, for us to stand with those organizations, all it takes is 1% of your income each month. I think the ask is small, but the possibility is really massive.
And it's exciting, I guess, to think of the scalability of this, that really we can continue, if the income grows, we can continue to work with more and more people. So Meg, if you wanted to say to anybody considering getting involved in one by one, considering giving, what would you pitch them? Come on, this is your opportunity.
Well, I mean, when you give to One by One, you can literally be a part of life change all over the world. And we've talked about it all throughout this podcast, but I think that for me is the thing. That's why I give to One by One. It's because you get to be a part of so many different stories when otherwise you might not be able to. And I think the great thing about One by One as well is that there's loads of ways to get involved. So you can pray for us. And in fact, we've got a newsletter that's going to be coming out every month. And that's something we're excited about as well, because we know that for some people, for some of us, 1% will be a lot to give. And so we really want to say, look, this is what's going on in organizations all over the world. This is what your money is doing. And so you can pray with us. You can share the information all over social media, or just sort of tell your mum over Sunday dinner, whatever you do, or you can give. And I think, you're not confined to 1%. You can obviously give more percent if you would like. And we've had some amazing people get in touch with us to say, I'm giving a percentage of my business profits, or I'm giving more than 1%. But for those who are giving 1%, that is really what we want to see, because we know that the collective 1% from all over our church will make the world of difference to organizations and ultimately individuals all over the world.
Come on, absolutely love that. I love even hearing the response of our church already, people grasping this and setting their vision, even around their business, to be a part of this. And I know, Chris, that's a heart of yours as well, around business. What would you speak to particularly maybe business owners, entrepreneurs that maybe have the capacity to scale up in the way of earning more money to be able to partner with One by One? Anything you would want to speak into that specifically?
Yeah, I know that one of the business leaders in our church reached out to me when he heard about the vision. He said, this is exactly what I've been waiting for, something that I can get behind with my business. That, even the idea that it's a standalone entity, One by One is registered independently as a charity in the UK, is helpful for him in terms of his business. I would say be part of the conversation, step into a relationship with us. We're really keen to stress that we're not looking for transactional involvement. By all means, send us 1% and never ask us anything, but we want you to come on the journey with us. We want you to be part of the journey of the founding of One by One, of the establishing of the funds, of the onboarding of partners, of stories of life change. And we think that's a great story to be able to share into your business, to your, whether it's your staff that you're inspiring through that story, whether it's your customers that you're sharing some of the highlights, the sort of highlight reel with. If you need stuff from us to be able to promote the fact that you're giving into One by One, we'll give you that stuff as well. Yeah, we would love businesses to get involved in this, because we want to build a community of people who are passionate about generosity and passionate about seeing lives changed one by one.
Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast today. I want to encourage you to get involved in One by One if you want to be part of a generation that is generous, seeing lives changed all over the world. Join us next time for more conversations as we take things to the next level.